everyone, and welcome to my channel again. This week I've got something interesting to show you. I'd like to say hello to the girls from my studio who we normally meet once a fortnight and have a craft play together, but of course we can't at the moment, so I'm trying to do the things that I would normally do with that group of ladies in my tutorials so that they don't miss out on the things that we normally do. So today I've started a new series which I've called Stuff from the Useful Box, and if you're an Australian you probably grew up with Play School and the Useful Box and know exactly what I mean when I talk about Stuff from the Useful Box. I think there was a similar program in the UK, but I can't remember quite what that was called. But Play School is an ABC program for kids, and they had a wonderful useful box that they'd draw lovely things out of every week and make something interesting. So what I've done today is I've salvaged all the stuff from my recycle bins that I'd normally turf out, because in these strange times we're finding it very hard to actually get stuff to make things with, because we can't get out as easily and the postage may be taking a bit longer. So even if you order your normal things online, you still might have a waiting period before you can actually do that project if it turns up. So in between times I thought we might have a look at what we have around our own house and see what we can do to make something for our journal making or our craft making that we can successfully turn into something useful. So I'll just go through some of the things I collected out of my rubbish today that I want to recycle into something interesting. So of course the useful box used to have things like this all the time. These are the inserts from paper towel, and these make very good spines for the back of journals. So what you would do is, there are a lot of tutorials on how to do this online, but you'd split them in half and you put one half inside the other, and that makes it extra strong. And then you press out the edges a little bit, so you might flatten it down a bit on the side so you've got something to hang on to, or you might be lining it with some, say, Tyvek or some cotton or whatever you're lining your book with, so you've got some flaps to stick it to. So this part is your curved spine. So that's something that's worth hanging on to. Some other things I've collected in my bin today were this lovely box here, which I can see would make a beautiful traveller's notebook cover. It's just about the right size for that. So boxes of any kind are very good for covering and making soft covered journals out of. So this one I'm keeping to make a traveller's notebook, so that's not going out in the bin, that's useful. Things like this can be made into cards and tags. I mean, they already have a little hole in the top to tie your ribbon in, and you can just cover those however you like. You can do a bit of collage or make that your base for something that you want to paint over with gesso and make something pretty out of, so we can use that. This is another lovely box that can be used for a TN journal, just the right nice slim size, and these boxes are all clean on the inside, so they're not dirty or projects. Inside we have a jelly box, and a jelly box is very useful for making pockets with, and I'll show you how to do that. You just cut them down the seams. I'll show you that shortly. These sort of plastic containers, the acetate is very good on those for making things like this. So if you're looking for some plastic to put your dried flowers and plants in, or your butterflies or whatever, or you can use them for shaker boxes, because this one has a little lip, so you can seal the back off, you can fill it up with pretty sort of that glittery sequins and things like that, or shells or anything like that, and use that on the front of a journal. So if you had that as your front piece, you could put shells and pretty things inside of that and make a shaker box to go on the front of your journal. So that's useful. This is another little one that can make a card or a tuck spot. It already has a lovely shaped hole in the top to put your ribbon through. So packaging like that is very useful. So what else did I find? I found this sort of newsletters and things that come in the mail that have nice pictures on them. I mean, that's a gorgeous picture of a dog there. You can always cut those out, especially if you're making children's or themed sort of journals. Look for things like that. So that's a good place to look for things to cut out. We also have little boxes like this that you can make, another soapbox that you can cut and make tuck spots and pockets out of. So that's another great idea. I'll show you how to cut those so that they make a really nice little pocket in your journal, and we'll decorate some of those. So okay, here's one I've cut. Here's one I've done earlier, as they say. So this is one of those soap boxes here, and I've just cut it so that you have two halves of your soap box. Cut the little tabs off, and I've just, where it's got the large side, which is here, I've actually scored that down the middle and made that tuck in. So when you glue it to your page, you can punch out a little lip at the top if you want to, and you can glue that to your page and you've got a nice little pocket there already. And you can do the same with the top side. This can be a sideways pocket, so you've made your side smaller and you fold that in and you've got a nice little pocket there that you can use in your books. So they're a great thing to use, and nothing's ever rubbish. Now the other thing you can look for is clothing. Old clothing that you're going to throw out. You can find marvellous bits of beautiful lace on. So if you've got lingerie that you're chucking out, check for really pretty lace before you throw it out, because you can find some beautiful trim on that. This little bag I've collected, I've cut off old tops and t-shirts and singlets that have really pretty lace. I mean, the singlets may have been worn out and no good, but the lace is still very beautiful. And these are the things that you can actually use to create some lovely work in your journals. And I mean, look at that, that's beautiful. If you went to buy that at a material fabric store, it would cost you a fortune. You know, you'd probably pay $20 for something like that. So they're worth grabbing and using. You can snip them up and make little snippets, collages and things, or you can use them as a whole. So that's one option. Okay, so other things that we might use that we might be able to find around the house are things like this in the sewing drawer, a little bit of binding that you can dye, and if you don't have anything to dye it with, there's always some food colouring in the cupboard. You can use vegetable things like beetroot dye, you can use avocado stones boiled up to make avocado dye, that will give you a pinkish look. Red cabbage will give you a blue look, so you can boil that up and use the water for dyes. So there's many things around the home that we could actually make use of in times like this when it's hard to find things. So that's something to think about as well. There's also pretty crocheted lace that you can find on the bottom of clothing that you might have thrown out. It's no good anymore. But that was just a sweet little crocheted piece that I thought I'd keep because it would collage up really nicely in some of the work that we do. Also, pyjamas often have these cute little logo-y type applique things on them, so they're worth cutting out and keeping. I've got a few kids books to do at the moment, so things like that are really handy. So I grab things like that. Old shirts that something tragic may have happened to, they may not be, you know, worn out even, but they're very pretty. This one has some lovely crocheted lace on it, and it was too good to throw out. But the fabric that it was made of was so thin, it actually got caught on my handbag one day, and that tore the piece off the edge, which made it impossible to fix really without a lot of trouble. So rather than throw it out, I thought it was lovely fabric. I could see that going into a boho journal or some fabric pockets, or it's really quite pretty. Those kind of things are worth having a look at, because you know for sure in your cupboard you've got something. I mean, it's even got the most beautiful pearl buttons, shell buttons on the cuffs, so they're worth keeping for journaling too. We use a lot of things like that, and pearl buttons down the front, so it was too good to throw away. I mean, we could cut that up and use it for many different things. You could even get a book cover out of it. It's quite a nice piece of material all round. So something like that even is worth having a look at for journal making, and you'll find in no time at all you'll gather up enough stuff that you can actually make a whole journal out of. And another thing that I've found quite useful is collecting these paper bags. So supermarket bags at the moment, these are around pretty much everywhere. They make gorgeous art journals, so I'm going to attempt to make one of those in a little while. So I've collected up quite a few of these paper bags, and we'll make a lovely art journal out of that. I've got a couple of kids that really need some art journals at the moment because they are stuck at home, probably driving their parents crazy, and need something to occupy them. So I'll be making some nice art journals to send their way in some happy mail. And what else do I find? Oh, I have a lot of these water boxes that water comes in, because we live where we are not on town water, so we buy our drinking water. And I have loads of these boxes, and I thought it's such a shame to just, you know, throw out a really good solid strong box like that when we're always looking for cardboard to make nice journals out of. So I worked out a way of cutting them that I could actually make journals out of the boxes without too much trouble at all. So I cut the panel out that has the water tap in it, and I was left with these two lovely flaps. So you may not want a journal quite as big as this unless you are doing an art journal, but you could cut that down to whatever size you really want for a normal size journal, and make the spine as wide or as narrow as you want just by taking some off the edge. So you can have a 2-inch spine if you want. If you want a really big one, you can have a 3-inch spine, or you could cut it narrow and have a narrow one. But it's really strong because with those two flaps glued together, you'll get a really strong spine that's tough and will take any hard use. And you've got this really sturdy cover that you can put fabric on and make a lovely journal out of. So that was something I thought would be handy, and all my girls can have one of those for their next project because I've got a stack of those. So next on the list was this that I found. Surely I can make something out of this that would be handy, and as so happens I really needed something to keep all these things on my desk in. Paintbrushes and, you know, bits and pieces of spritz and glues and bits and pieces that sit on my desk and end up in a mess. Wink of Stella, everybody has Wink of Stella, that's something you just can't go without. All my lovely water pens, which I really love to play with. I needed somewhere for those, and some glue pens and marker chalk pens and the odd paintbrush. So I thought I might cover this up and make it a bit stronger, and that can be my little caddy for my bits and pieces on my desk. So that was worth keeping because I can fit quite a lot of odds and ends in there and keep it all together. Then if you wander outside, you can find lots of autumn leaves if you live in the southern hemisphere, we're coming into autumn. If you're in the northern, you've got spring, so you've got lots of spring daisies and things. But I have collected these and pressed them, particularly because I was doing a Japanese journal, so I wanted some Japanese maple, and I've made these little specimen cards out of the Japanese maple, and I just use recycled acetate which came off some packaging, so you just cut that out and use it as a window, so that's pretty easy to find. I've also pressed from earlier in the year some sweet little pansies and daisies and things that I found, some morning glory there, some blue periwinkle, and all kinds of little flowers that I found out in the yard. So just take a look around and see what you can find. You can find the most beautiful things sometimes. Even just the grasses are really pretty. I've pressed grasses like pussy tails, and you can do wonderful things with them, and you don't have to just stop at using the pressed flowers as they are. You can always put your grasses or your pussy tails down and spray some paint or dye over the top onto some lovely art paper, and you can get some really beautiful prints. I think I have showed you that in a previous video that I've done, how to do those. So they're something that you can do from home without too much trouble. I've pressed here some lavender, so I've got some lovely lavender pieces that we could use. It's been a while since I've visited this pile, so I can't even remember what's here, but it's really pretty daisies and all those sorts of things are something that you can probably find in your backyard or neighbourhood close by, on one of your exercise walks that you're allowed to have. It's pretty amazing to think in these times that you can't just get up and go. You have to think about what you're actually doing and what you're actually allowed to do, which we never have before in our lifetime had to consider. So there's a pussy tail, just to show you what a pussy tail looks like. So that's just a little wild grass I picked out on the reserve. So there are things like seed pods. You can spray those onto paper and they look really pretty too. Okay, so back to making our little upcycled soapbox tuck pockets. So we'll see what we can do with those. I've stamped a shell here, little shell, close to my heart. That's one of theirs. So I've got some bits and pieces here that I thought we might be able to use on our little goat's milk and lavender baby soap pocket. So what I've got here is just the basic box with the back cut off, which you can make another pocket out of, and I've cut the little tabs off the top and bottom, so you're left with this bit, and I've just put a line down here with the scorer so that you can fold that under and you've got somewhere to glue. So on the back you can glue there, so that will glue onto your book page like that. So what I thought we might do is I've got some deco paste, decoupage glue. Now you don't need to have decoupage glue, you can use normal PVA glue and just water it down a little bit. So the trouble with this is it gets sealed so hard I can't get the lid off it. Whatever you've got around really, I mean if you've got kids you've probably got heaps of glue around. I just wet my brush and pick up a little bit. So that gives you something to actually stick down to on your box, and I just thought that I might put some of this lovely tree serviette that I've got here, because it kind of looks a little bit like seagrass, and as I'm working on a mermaid journal at the moment I'm trying to find things that go with the sea. So I was looking for something that looked a little like seagrass. So just put that over there for the time being, out of the way. And I thought I might just stick some of this lovely looking seagrassy kind of stuff onto my box as the base to work from and go from there. So I don't want to over glue it because that'll take a long time to dry, but of course you can do another layer over the top. So I'm just going to put that on as my base at the moment, and I'll just cut roughly around that. Now you know you won't see the bits underneath that you glue down, but you will see your side pieces, so I might just put a bit more down the side so that'll hang on to there. And it doesn't take a lot of glue to actually stick a serviette down. Let's face it, they're very thin and it will stick quite easily. So I'm just going to cut that around now where that tucks. I'll just cut it down slightly to start with, because you can always cut into your finer bits when it's dry. It's probably best to actually let it dry properly before you try cutting it. But if you haven't got much time to film, you need to be kind of doing these things as you go, so it will tear if you're not careful. But that bit's going to get tucked under, so you won't see any of that. So the seagrass is going to be my base, and what you can do if you have gesso or white paint, you can paint it first so that you don't see any of the words and things coming through, but I'm actually going to cover that over, so I don't need to do that for this one. But you can, gesso it or white paint if you want to, but because I'm going to cover most of that, I'm not really going to worry too much. So I'm thinking of putting this lovely shell on here. And I'm just thinking about what else I might use. I was thinking this nice piece of lace might look good along the bottom of the box part that hangs out there. What we are going to do is put some of this nice green fabric underneath, and that will give you another layer of texture. Now this is muslin, and a lot of people will have this around their kitchens anyway for a lot of projects that people have been doing in kitchens lately. But if you don't, you can use things like old stockings or bits of old bandage or anything that's clean that you can dye with a bit of food colouring. Everyone has a bit of food colouring around in their kitchen, and you can dye it with that, and that's what I've actually done in this case. I've actually dyed that so that it's a nice green colour. So you'll need some glue then to glue that on. You can use the same PVA that you were using if you want to, and that just gives you another layer underneath. Now you probably find with your box, because it's sitting up 3D, you'll need something to stop whatever you're putting in it from falling through. So I'm just going to add another little bit of cardstock underneath here to stop that from actually falling through the bottom, because you can't glue it flat to your page. Well, you can if you want to, and then you have a pocket that sits up, but because it's like 3D, I'm going to add a little piece to the bottom of that. So I'll show you how to do that shortly. So just so you get the idea, in case my camera cuts off before I finish doing what I'm doing, I'm going to cut some lace to go along the bottom as well, and I'm going to add my shell, which I think goes up that way, and I'm also going to add a little shell on a pin to the lace. So if I don't get that far before the camera cuts out, you'll know exactly what I'm planning on doing here. So that is that. I'm just going to get some cardstock to make a little piece that goes underneath. Okay, so I think we might have lost a little bit there when the camera cut off, but what I did was fussy cut around the shell to fit on here nicely, and I made the little bottom piece so that your things didn't fall out through the bottom. So I just put a little folded piece of cardstock and glued to the bottom, just so you've got somewhere that your things don't fall out from. Depending on how deep you want it, you might want to cut that narrower depending on how much room you've got in your book. If you're going to put it on the inside cover where you've got plenty of room, or within your book you might want it a bit flatter, so you can work out where you want that cut down to. And I've decided that I might add a little bit of colour to my shell. So I've got some watercolour pencils here, and you might find if you've got children they have watercolour pencils or some kind of pencils, textures, colouring, whatever, just to add a little bit of colour to your shell. I think these might be pink shells in real life. It's a long time since I've seen one of these shells. I can't actually remember what colour they are. But I thought I might just add a little tiny bit of colour to it, just so it's not so stark. And then maybe even a bit of green around the edge to blend in with the colours that I've got in my work. The sea colours, which are what I'm using for my Mermaid journal. So I've just added a little bit, and then I'm just going to take my watercolour pen and just lightly spread that out a bit. So I'm spreading the colour out through the shell just to give it a little bit of tone, and that little bit of green on the edge just to highlight and blend in with the greens in the work that I'm doing. Doesn't need a lot, just enough to give it just that little bit of life. Okay, so I'll just put that over there and let that dry just for a second before I pick it up. In the meantime, I can glue on this piece of lace that I've got here, and I also made a little word to go on the top which says cherish, and I've just backed that onto some tea stain paper so we can glue that on too. I'm just going to run a little bit of glue along the bottom there to hold that lace. I know this glue is strong enough that it will hold lace okay, so you need a glue that will be strong enough to hang on. So if you're using the PVA glue, just put plenty on there. This is the art glitter glue that I'm using, and it's actually quite a good one because it's an all-purpose glue. It will hold things like that on. Because it's a tacky glue, it dries fairly quickly, so you don't have to worry too much about it. It will hang on. So that's there, and I'm going to put the little cherish here and the little shell wherever it looks best, and whatever angle you decide you like, you can have it up that way, which I think is the way that the stamp came, sort of that way, and then your little cherish there, and you've got quite a pretty little box. So I'll glue that on. So from nothing comes something. You can actually add to your journal. And if you didn't have much cardstock around that you could actually make a box, you've already got one there ready to use, and saved wasting that cardstock into landfill or whatever. And you can pin your little gem or trinket or charm onto the bottom. pin it onto the nice heavy cotton there. Gives it something strong to hang on to. With your little bowl pin. Or you can use whatever pin you've got around really. If you've got a collection of pins from clothing items, you can use those. So that's our first little soapbox recycled, upcycled, and that makes a pretty pocket to go in your book then. And you can fill that with all sorts of different things, cards and tags. So there we go, that's our first one, and I'll come back and do the second one in just a moment. Okay, so for the second soapbox half, I've made that quite simple. I've just gessoed or white paint over the writing on the box, and I stamped just the tail of a mermaid on there, and I went round the edges and just used a little bit of green colouring just to the edges to blend in with the colours. I found a little flat seashell to go on there, and a couple of bits of lace just to add a little bit of texture and depth. So I'll glue those on. This little piece of lace here I thought looked a little bit like Mermaid here, or a weed, bit of seaweed or something. So I just thought that would look nice, coming down her back like that. And just this little scrap left over from our lace on our other soapbox, the crocheted lace. It came off a t-shirt or something. Just as a little piece on the corner, just to add a little bit of dimension to it. And then we've got this beautiful seashell. Because that's a little bit heavier, I decided to grab the glossy accents, and I thought I would put the glossy accents on as it holds heavier items like buttons and shells and heavier things, much stronger. So we'll let that sit there. It takes quite a while to dry the glossy accents, but it does hold very well. So that's from Ranger Glossy Accents, and it's a very strong resin type glue. So I thought, as she had some shells around her tail here, I'd add a real shell there, and that gives you another little box to put, little box type pocket to put in your journal, maybe inside the front cover where you've got just that little bit more space, so you've got a bit of room. So that was just from one soapbox. I used this stamp here, which was from Stampendos, and it's the mermaid with the shells, and I just used a tail for that. So that's a very simple way of dressing it up without too much fuss. It wasn't a lot of work at all. So all you need really is the gesso and a couple of bits and pieces from around the house, and you've got yourself a nice little pocket all ready to go. So that's today's little lesson. I'd like to say hello to all of the ladies in my class. That is Jean, Joan, Tracy, Marie, Leanne, Karina, Gloria, Sonia and Doreen. I hope I haven't missed anybody, and hope that you can get something out of that for your projects for the next week, and I'll be back with something else soon. Bye for now. See you next time.